Welcome to the session. We have 5 speakers for the first 1.5 hours. Then there's a coffee break, and then there's 4 more speakers, as far as I'm informed now. So there was a little change. Somebody came from another session because he was all alone in his session. There are several speakers joining us from remote, but the first speaker here is in person. It's Fiona Travis. She is Senior Public Engagement Officer at the Royal Observatory, Edinburgh. Fiona works with scientists and engineers to inspire and involve the public in astronomy-linked science through a program of community outreach. She will present her learnings and experiences in her talk. It's a case study, Rethinking Community Engagement. Have fun and yeah.
I can't.
Are we too early?
No, I need permission. Like I need to be able to. At the moment, I'm just a participant rather than like a
okay, I see.
Speaker. So I need to be like a panelist.
IT should have sent you the login information, but we can also do it via my computer. Do you have it on a stick or something? Sorry,
no.
I didn't.
No.
Yeah, then I send it.
Yeah. Can anyone provide me with a panelist link to join or promote me so I can share my slides? Can anyone help? Me?
I've just sent a link in the chat. This is the link that I've been sent. So if you want to try that.
Thank you.
No problem.
I can't see anything in the chat.
Oh, hang on. I'll try and send it directly to you then.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just rejoining. Sorry, everyone. Whoops. Oh. It's okay.
He told me that he sent you all the presenters got the login information.
Oh. Yay.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, everybody. Hello. Are we all still awake? Hi, my name is Fiona Travis. Thank you very much for the introduction. It's great to be here at such a wonderful location to present this talk. So just to give you some context of where I work, as the introduction mentioned, I'm Fiona Travis. I'm a Senior Public Engagement Officer, and I actually work at the Royal Observatory, Edinburgh, which is a site that's also known as the UK Astronomy Technology Centre. So lots of acronyms again, but basically that is part of the national labs. So these are labs across the UK. They're large scale facilities. And you can see on this map, we're kind of the northern outpost, the only one in Scotland, up in Edinburgh, but based also at the beautiful Royal Observatory Edinburgh site. So I'm very, very lucky to work in a site that includes beautiful Victorian heritage, so these beautiful buildings, and also very high-tech facilities as well. So if you are ever in Edinburgh in Scotland, please do pop by. I'd be more than happy to show you around. We have the best views in the city, but I'm biased. So today what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about quickly just a couple of definitions, just making sure that we're on the same page, because I've noticed that a lot of people talk about community engagement and communities, but I think it depends on who you are, where you work, and different people might see these things as different definitions. So I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page with that first. Then I'll move on to talking about our rethink. So, so this is quite a lot of work over the past year or so that's ended up in a community engagement plan. So I'll just go through some of the key things of that, because I don't have very much time today, but I'll try and give you an overview of that. So that will include our journey so far, our approach, and just an example project, just to give you a bit of context of how we've applied this new approach, and then just some final thoughts at the end. So first of all, community. What is community? So for this talk today, I'm thinking about external communities. So not the research community itself, because I understand some people use the phrase community for kind of internal networks, but this is very much the external community. So the public, also as they're known. And in Scotland, we have a really good resource called the National Standards for Community Engagement. It's from the Scottish Community Development Centre. So I'm sure you have maybe similar things in the countries where you work, but it's got a really, really good framework for community engagement. It's got kind of 7 steps to that. So it's a really good resource. I'll share the link as well with my presentation afterwards if you want to have a look. So this is just something that helps focus our work, and they have a really nice definition of community that I really like. So as you can see on the screen there, it's a group of people united by at least one common characteristic, including geography, identity, or shared interest. So I think that sums it up quite nicely. So what I did is I presented a similar kind of talk, information to our internal stakeholders and internal communities and asked them this question. So we don't have time to ask this everyone today in here, but just have a little think in your mind what communities you might be part of. So these are the things that people came back to us. We did a little kind of Mentimeter, quick poll of everyone, and it just really shows the diversity of communities. So it might be something that you're part of that's just to do with where you live, or something that you're interested in, a hobby, or some are kind of work-based communities as well. So just shows the real variety of communities that are out there. So I'd encourage you to have a think about this in your team or anyone you're working with as well, just because it throws up lots of ideas. You might never know that people are part of communities of audiences you really want to work with, and there are a way into them. So it's a really useful thing to do. So moving on from communities to community engagement. So again, from the Scottish Community Development Centre, I really like this definition. So I came across this resource as well because I've worked with a lot of people who are in the sector of community learning and development. So that's something in the UK that a lot of charities, third sector organisations, people that work in the council, that kind of thing, they are CLD workers, and a lot of them are specialists in this area. So I've learned a massive amount from just being around them, which is brilliant. And I really like, again, this definition of community engagement. So it's about relationships here as well, which I think is really nice. Puts relationships at the forefront. So it's about people. So why do we have a community engagement plan? Why did I bother creating this? Well, we just really needed to define the focus of primarily off-site work that we did, because it was quite kind of scattergun approach all over the place, kind of when and where people got in touch with us. That sounds interesting. We'll go and do that. So instead, we just thought, we'll have a think about what we really want to do and who we want to target and why. Give us clear parameters for measuring success, obviously for reporting and evaluation, and just to create something that's a best practice guide for volunteers and other staff as well that might not be as familiar with this kind of thing. So a tool for training. So I won't go into all the detail of things that are in the plan. If you want to know more, please do come and grab me later. But basically it was a change of focus for us. So it moved towards, as I said, relationship building, focus on the people and the relationships with partners that we work with, longer term outcomes as well. So the evaluation focused on things that we could measure over repeated interventions. So working with people for a longer period of time, which I know a lot of you do in your brilliant projects that I've heard about so far on this conference. So this just shows you how we targeted the audience as well. So this is related to an initiative that is part of National Lab's public engagement called the Wonder Initiative. So that was a piece of work that relates to the 40% most socio-economically deprived areas surrounding these national labs that we focused our work. So that kind of drove that first criteria at the top, so to do with that initiative. And maybe they had barriers for coming to site for whatever reason that might be. Also, I looked at geographic criteria. So we kind of defined that as 1.5 miles from the Royal Observatory Edinburgh, but I mean, put a figure on it, it just helps you to kind of narrow down the options. And also these people are likely to have a kind of emotional connection because they've seen the building, they've maybe been there before, they've got some kind of connection already to it. Or perhaps it's a partner that gives us access to local focus audience through their network. So it might be kind of an organisation, for example, we work with Edinburgh Community Food that provide food banks, and services to people across the city, but they also work with people in lots of these socio-economically deprived areas. So they're a really good networking organization. So our approach as well, this just shows you the kind of key things that were in the plan. So it's to do with connecting to the community with information that's important to them, people they can relate to. I know in the last session before lunch, Terry mentioned the Aspires project, and there's the Science Capital kind of teaching tools as well. That's a really big part of that research, things that people can really relate to and they're important to their lives, and to support them as well in realizing, developing and sharing their skills. So this is something that's known as unearthing as well in kind of the community engagement. So unearthing these skills people maybe didn't realize that they had that would be useful in science. So I really like this, this model as well. This is something that really focuses our work that I thought you might find useful too. So if you haven't seen this before, this is the participation ladder. So there's lots of different versions of this, but this basically shows the direction in which you want to go with your work. So moving from doing to, I mean, nobody should be coercing anyone. I mean, that's like, yeah, we definitely don't aim for that. But yeah, I can imagine we're all in the middle aiming towards co-production, co-designing, and really working with communities. That's the key thing here, really taking our time to listen to what's important to them. I'll share the slide as well, and there's kind of links to where I got this from. So sorry, this slide has got a lot of writing on it and there's a lot of text. I'll zoom into these places very quickly. But this is the 7-step process I kind of came up with the team of how we identify partners, who we want to work with, how we kind of target those audiences, and then the process that we go through. So this is probably similar to processes you follow, but we just kind of, part of the process of working out the process was us talking through how we wanted to do things and why. So an important point here is that there is an exit strategy. Now that's not, often because things have gone horribly wrong, but that's just because, sometimes partnerships move to the end for whatever reason. You just need to think of different ways you might do that. Okay, so this just takes me to a little story about a organization we worked with and a recent partnership. So this was a project working with a group called Get Together. So they're a really great organization that works in Edinburgh, and they're all about working with people with different types of disabilities. And just like Claire was talking about this morning in the keynote, really helping people to gain confidence in social situations and support each other in their shared interests. So I've just popped a little figure there from their recent impact report, because I really like that the fact that they also really focus on employing people that have disabilities and getting their voices into all the work that they do. So it's a really great organization. We were lucky to partner with them on this project. We had initial conversations. We got to know each other. We talked about our shared objectives, outcomes, all the kind of stuff you do in partnership work. And we got to know each other by providing them with some virtual tours, obviously this was all online during COVID. So we did a lot of kind of online meetings just to learn a little bit more about how each other works and what we're interested in. So sorry, this picture's so bad. That's one of our engineers showing a very high-tech, shiny piece of equipment that picture does not justify it. So moving on to the next steps, we were very flexible and generous with our time, and we moved towards co-creation we were very lucky that they already had mechanisms for this. So they had these meetings called Monday Magic. So basically they have people that are part of their community, their users, they have these kind of collaborative meetings about event planning and where they want to go with the organization. They also have really great ambassadors that they recruit that are part of the community as well. So they already had a lot of this in place. So I really learned a lot from them. And we also asked them a lot of things as well. We did kind of little chats where we would give them options and weigh them up with what they wanted from our interactions with each other. So it was very open throughout these stages. And now we've moved on, we're very lucky to this kind of ongoing program of activities. So we've done our online program with them. They really wanted to meet lots of astronomers and experts. So we provided them a way to ask them lots of questions. We did a lot of that kind of thing online. And then they've started going out on trips as well. So they have now named themselves, they're called the Space Gang, which was brilliant. So they are the Space Gang. We let, that's their name. We don't want to name them because it's their group. And they go on lots of different trips, and this is them at Dynamic Earth, a science centre. And recently they came to visit the observatory, which is great. And we could celebrate, I wish I had a picture. We had a space themed cake and we celebrated a year of working together. So it's very exciting that we're going to continue this partnership and see where it goes. Their next idea is they really want to work with young people. So as role models, as representatives. So I'm excited as to where that's going to go. So very quickly, before I finish, just some top tips on evaluation, because I think it's obviously important to evaluate impact of these kind of things. So yeah, as we said, just make sure you discuss things very early on. If you've got outcomes methods as well, they might not be the methods that suit them in collecting evaluations. So just make sure you capture all that very early on. Also, it's important if you're doing repeat interventions, so meeting them multiple times, just to define when and how often you'll collect feedback, because you obviously don't want to do feedback every single time and then it starts to become a little bit ridiculous. So just maybe after so many months or different key milestones in the project. Check if it's the best way for them, just ask them, they'll be very honest, I'm sure. And just try and get creative. So I'm sure lots of different ideas of how to do evaluation, but just make sure you're as creative as you can be, because filling out forms can feel a little bit formal when you've got to know people for a while. And finally, I just wanted to share the logo for Space Gang. This is their logo that they have come up with, which I think is brilliant. And they also have a Facebook group where they share lots of things that they're interested in to do with space. That's completely, active on their own. And this was brilliant to be able to take a step back and just, really rewarding to see where they've gone with this and where they've taken it. And I won't take any credit for that. It's completely, the Space Gang has done that themselves. And I think that's the joy of community engagement in this way. And a real highlight for me was when they actually asked us in an online session, do you want to join the Space Gang? And I said, yeah, I'd love to join the Space Gang. Why not? And I thought that was really, really special. So last slide, I promise. So this is just, if you're inspired, maybe not, maybe you do this all the time, but if you are inspired to rethink community engagement in your organization, I just like you to think really carefully about, first of all, how do you define community? How does your organization? Just make sure you define things really clearly. Do you have an understanding of the local community ecosystem? So who are the organizations that are already out there and what they're doing? So there was a lot of research into that as well. What can we learn from them? Where might the gaps be? And what networks you can use? And also, how would working with communities in this way support and enhance your wider organizational strategy? So in the last session, there was a lot of talk about getting buy-in from people, senior members of staff. But I think it's really important, always make sure you've got links, especially this might be a slightly different way of working for your organization. So I think that's really important. And finally, just don't forget to celebrate and share things. So this is a plug for our new website. It's not that shiny, but it's a lot better than what it was before. But it's really nice that we have, hopefully, oh no, it won't play. Oh, I was going to show you. We have a communities page on there now, and it's got a project section as well, which is really nice to be able to allow the Space Gang to share what they're up to. So yeah, that's me. So yeah, if you want to reach out to me in any way, I realize I'm 15 minutes now, so sorry about that. And yeah, please do email me or connect with us on Twitter and all sorts of things. I'd love to have a chat. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't really say in the beginning that there will be time to ask questions at the end of the session before the coffee break. So we make the presentations first, and it's really 5 presenters only in 1.5 hours. So you didn't do that in time. Our next presenter is online. Wana Stroh, I hope I pronounced this right. If not, then correct me. She's Senior Communication Officer at EMBL's European Bioinformatics Institute. She coordinates the Institute's strategic communication, content production, media relations, and exhibitions, so a lot. Wana holds a Master in Communication, Culture, and Media, and the title of her talk is The Day We Disrupted Biology, the AlphaFold database launch. I'm quite curious.
Great, that's good. It means I've done my job at seeing people's interest. So I'm going to share my slides, and please do let me know if you can't see them for whatever reason. I'm not hearing anyone shouting, so I will guess that you can see and hear okay. But do stop me if there are any issues. So hi everybody, I'm Wana, and I'm a communications officer at EMBOL's European Bioinformatics Institute. So today I want to share an example of how EMBOL has worked with the artificial intelligence experts at DeepMind to develop and release the AlphaFold database for protein structure predictions. And specifically, I'm going to focus on the comms campaign because that was the part that I was involved in. So it's a slightly different talk, but I feel like it's a good way to highlight a different aspect of our work that we don't always talk about so much, which is collaborating with the private sector. So first, I'll just say a few words about EMBOL EBI. So we are one of the 6 sites of the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, and we're located in Cambridge in the UK. We focus very much on bioinformatics, and we manage over 40 open data resources for all kinds of biomolecular data. And our data resources are used by millions of life scientists all over the world. So just to give you an example, on an average day, we get over 100 million web requests to our databases. So I'm just going to set the scene for those of you who might not know anything about AlphaFold. So the protein folding problem is one of the grand challenges of biology. So proteins are the building blocks of life, and they underpin every single biological process that happens in all living things. And there are over 200 million known proteins, which means that we have the genetic sequences of these proteins. And they're all available in a database called UniProt, which is co-managed by EMBOL EBI and the Swiss Institute for Bioinformatics. But of these 200 million proteins, only 180 have known structures. So basically, it's important to say that each protein has a unique 3D shape or a structure, and the way that that structure looks influences what the protein actually does. So the structure is really important. But one of the big mysteries of biology is that we're still not entirely sure how and why proteins fold to make these unique shapes. So for the last 60 years or so, the structural biology community has been using a range of methods to try and determine protein structures. So this usually involves a lot of very large and very expensive equipment. And they've done a fantastic job. And already we have 180,000 known structures. But like I said, this is quite a long way to go to the 200 million. So at some point, it became quite clear that to accurately predict structures, we need different types of tools. And at this point, the community started to explore artificial intelligence. Maybe it's worth taking just a quick step back to talk a little bit about the applications of having protein structures at our fingertips. So they would be really useful for understanding health and disease, for developing new drugs and vaccines, but also for identifying enzymes that can help, for example, to recycle plastics or to reduce contaminants, pollutants in the environment. So really the world is your oyster once you've got access to protein structures. Right, so to address the protein folding problem, the biology community set up CASP in 1994. And this was an event that happened every 2 years where computational biologists would get together and they would compare their methods for predicting protein structures. And for a long time, none of these computational methods came anywhere near the accuracy of the experimental methods. But in 2020, DeepMind's AlphaFold system was deemed to have achieved this level of accuracy. So of course, at that point, all of a sudden, the entire community wanted to get hold of the AlphaFold structure predictions. And there was a lot of speculation about whether DeepMind would make these available freely or at a cost. And this is particularly interesting because the AlphaFold artificial intelligence system was trained using open data from data resources such as those managed at EMBOL EBI. So it would have been sort of poetic justice to make the predictions also openly available for the community, but there was no guarantee that that was going to happen. So after a few months of suspense, we were very pleased to be approached by DeepMind because they wanted our help to create an open database to share all of these protein structure predictions. And of course, they approached this because EMBL EBI has decades of expertise of sharing the world's molecular data. And also we had a previous relationship with DeepMind. So at that point, we were faced with a very exciting challenge, which was to create a database to house the predictions in approximately 3 months' time, which is a slightly smaller time frame than what we're normally used to. And this database would first host all of the human proteins, which are about 200,000, and then it would increase massively to over 100 million proteins. So at this point, the first thing that we did was we created a project team, which spread across our technical colleagues, communications, and also involved leadership from both of the organizations. And we started to plan the launch. Of course, there was quite a big leak risk. So DeepMind hadn't made it publicly known that they were going to release these, and they wanted to basically create a surprise for the community. So our comms objectives were to promote the AlphaFold database. Of course, that's the main thing that we wanted to get out of it. We also wanted to achieve international press coverage and to make sure that the database was presented as a joint project between DeepMind and EMBL. We were keen to get endorsements from the scientific community. And finally, EMBL had another specific objective, which was to really highlight the value of open data. So in terms of challenges, I've already mentioned the short timelines. We also noticed very early on that we had quite different approaches to working, to comms, to creating messaging, and so on. So it was a case of sort of bringing those together. It was also really important to us to address any tensions between experimental methods and AI. So a lot of people were concerned that maybe experimental methods would be replaced by AI. We really wanted to make it very clear that we felt like AlphaFold was another tool in the toolbox, but it would not be replacing any of the experimental methods. We were also very keen to not oversell because all of the AlphaFold data are predictions. They are not proven structures. And finally, there was the point of making a very complex topic engaging. I mean, it took me 5 minutes just to explain the topic. So you can imagine that getting press coverage for this was not going to be incredibly easy. So in terms of our comms tactics, so DeepMind identified a few users of AlphaFold data to which they released data in advance of the launch, and basically asked them to provide endorsements for the quality of the data and kind of show the impact that the data could have on their work. And specifically, we worked with an organization that develops enzymes for recycling plastic and with an NGO that helps to develop treatments for neglected diseases. So we identified 2 really solid case studies that could be used on the launch date and could speak to the impact of the database. We worked with DeepMind to create a very comprehensive stakeholder list. So the people that we wanted to inform in advance, we made it very clear who was going to approach them and when, again, just to minimize the leak risk. We also had a joint press release, which was translated in a number of languages. We tapped into DeepMind's very extensive journalist contact list to pre-brief a few journalists, and also we organized a press conference with Nature and DeepMind. So the press conference was coordinated by Nature. And we had, so on the day of the launch, it all happened on social media in a sort of coordinated fashion. And since the launch, we've been working together to have sort of a steady comms drumbeat where we highlight new case studies, new data sets, and new features for the database. So the question is, did we achieve our objectives? So the first objective was to promote the database. And in the first 16 hours since launch, we had almost 50,000 users, which was very positive. We didn't really know what to expect, but we were very impressed with this. And it was really nice to see that 17% of the web traffic to the database came from Twitter. So clearly the social activity really had an impact. Since the database usage has sort of leveled at about 14,000 users on an average week, and every time we release a new feature or new data, we see that that spikes up to about 60,000. And also our first webinar about the database was our most popular ever, and we had over 1,500 registrations. So that was really positive. So our second objective was to achieve international press coverage and to make sure that EMBL didn't get lost in the story and was presented as an equal partner with regards to the database. And we were very pleased to see that of the many clippings, we had 200 plus clippings which mentioned EMBL. These were in over 40 countries, so really nice spread. And a lot of very high profile media outlets, so including, you can see there, the FT, El País, the Spiegel, but also we had BBC, the Times, Forbes, the Economist. So lots of really great and quite in-depth coverage, which was fantastic. Our third objective was to get endorsements from the scientific community. And again, here we were pleased with the results. We actually had 3 Nobel laureates give us quotes in advance of the launch. So we kind of had them ready to go and we included them in the press pack. And I think that also really helped to showcase that this was a high impact story. And on the day also, we had several UK government representatives and funders tweet their support once the launch happened. So you can see there an example from Mr. Patrick Vallance, but there we also had endorsements from the Office of AI, the UK Prime Minister, and so on. And overall, we saw really good social media engagement, and we continue to see that every time we post something about AlphaFold, it gets incredible engagement on social media. And finally, the last objective was to emphasize the value of open data. And we saw that about 75% of our clippings mentioned open data, which was fantastic because it's quite a difficult topic to grasp. So it was really nice to see it mentioned. Right, so maybe just one last point for me, a few lessons learned. I mean, generally, it was just a great knowledge exchange because it was such a different collaboration to work with a private company that has a very different approach, like I said. We found that it was really important to be transparent and to be clear on the different messages that we were working with, the different audiences that we were targeting, and what the two parties were trying to get from the project. We found that stakeholder engagement timings were essential, and pre-briefing stakeholders in advance and kind of telling them how they could support us was really useful. And similarly, we saw the value of endorsements and case studies. And maybe just one note for the comms people in the room, that it was really great to see that the leadership in both of the organizations were very supportive and very available when it comes to things like approving last-minute changes and doing media interviews and so on. Yes, so this is sort of just a brief tour of our experience, and I would love to hear your thoughts on how maybe you work with public-private collaborations, what you get out of them, and so on, because I feel like this is kind of an unexplored area. It would be great to hear what people think. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this success story. We will probably have some questions for you later. The next speaker is also online. It's Christiane Hübner. He already there. Yeah.
Yes, I'm here.
I see you. Okay. I'm going to present you. So you're working for the Svalbard Integrated Arctic Earth Observing System, and you're a science coordinator and communication. You have been science coordinator and communication person for 15 years already. You have a PhD in ecology, and Christiane will tell us on the state of environmental science in the Svalbard report, reaching the society through bottom-up processes.
Yes, thank you. Let me see, and just move this here. You see my screen all right? Good. So I will take you to a little bit colder place than you currently are. If I manage to move this, yes. So I take you to Svalbard, which is a Norwegian archipelago in the high Arctic with the lovely 13 degrees temperature right now. And it's about 1,300 kilometers from the North Pole. It has beautiful landscape, it has stunning wildlife, and this is of course attracting a lot of visitors, like tourists. We have very many tourists in summer with the boats, but also in winter, which want to observe the Arctic as long as it lasts, and experience the wildlife, and especially polar bears, of course. And we also have a lot of visitors, VIP visitors, that also come to get an overview over the local effects of global warming in the Arctic, as it's stated in the press release from Ban Ki-moon. And that's of course a good place to study global warming. The Svalbard is the place on Earth that is warming fastest. Please take into account that this scale is quite different here in the temperature change. So it's 5 to 7 times it warms 5 to 7 times the global warming averages, and it's also 2 times more than the Arctic warming. So this is the place to study climate change. It's also a place that is easy accessible. There are daily normal flights going there. And it has a very well developed infrastructure in place. There's a town, people are living here. And this has been used by a lot of international research institutions that have established high quality research infrastructure on the island. And that of course attracts a lot of researchers of many disciplines and also nations. So this year in the Research in Svalbard catalog, you find 600 projects from 52 countries working up here on the island. And there's a lot of different infrastructure placed all over Svalbard. And on this background, Norway took the initiative to establish a consortium to better coordinate all this research infrastructure and the research activities. And this is when SciOS was born. So what is SciOS? As you already heard, it has this nice and easy name, Svalbard Integrated Arctic Earth Observing System. It is a consortium of currently 28 institutions from 10 nations. They're all research infrastructure owners here on Svalbard. And the aim is to establish and maintain an observing system that includes the entire Earth system with all its spheres. By doing this, it coordinates a diverse set of research infrastructure elements covering all these spheres. So how is SciOS working? We have a central hub. That's why I'm working. You see it in the background on my screen. It's the SciOS Knowledge Center. Here we coordinate a set of services that are all aiming to improve the observing system and the use of it. And I would like to draw your attention to 2 of these services: the science optimization, which is the core work, so establishing the observing system and improving it so that science can be based on this network of observations that we, through our members, provide. And the communication and outreach service that spreads the word about this. Both of these services use something that is called the CES report, which is our annual report on the state of environmental science in Svalbard. And it has several aims or goals. It summarizes the state of knowledge in certain fields of research here on Svalbard, which then may result in new data sets, new infrastructure, and increased international cooperation. So you have to be an international research team writing these reports. And it's written by the research community, and we have an editorial board that accepts these contributions. But it also gives recommendations what is needed to fill these gaps. And the uniqueness of this report is that it is actually a platform to share ideas, and it is a place to make concrete recommendations on how to improve the infrastructure for Earth system science, and with that to improve the working conditions for the researchers, and then being able to answer the bigger questions than what you could do alone in a small research group. So it's working for the community. But this is only one of the goals of this CES report. It comes in two versions. One is the scientific report that is aiming towards the scientists in order to develop the priorities, to develop the observing system, as I mentioned. It comes mainly as a PDF document to save the environment. But then we have another version, that's the summary for stakeholders. And that is printed as a small leaflet. It's visually appealing and highlights the findings and the recommendations. And this is to take advantage of our position here on Svalbard with all these visitors, the tourists, the VIPs, and also the researchers for that matter. It's also aiming towards the local community and the decision makers that can influence the Earth system science. So it's raising awareness about the state of the environment here on Svalbard, but also the need of future research. And our ultimate goal is to ensure that there's a synergy between the scientific investigations that are driven by the wishes of the researchers to find knowledge, but also the knowledge needed by society to sustainably develop and safeguard the Arctic environment. So having these two approaches in one report, of course, is a big undertaking, and there's a lot of challenges. Researchers are quite reluctant to write these popular science summaries. They want to write science. They want to work with their topic. And we have tried to engage them to think a bit broader, to see how can their scientific work feed into the needs of society. It's still quite hard. They usually write the summary very late and in a hurry, and put more emphasis into the scientific work than in the popular science summary. Although the popular science summary is definitely the one that is most visible, as it is distributed to all the VIP groups and to the visiting researchers, and it's in every research station on Svalbard has these leaflets or the summary for stakeholders lying around. Another challenge, as we heard yesterday from Matthew Sims, journalists need it simple. So it's this leaflet with 10 chapters or so is already too much text. So we usually need also, in addition to this leaflet, to select single chapters and highlight one of the recommendations or one of the findings as a take-home message. And although there's a clear relevance for the Norwegian society and the decisions makers here, because it's Norway that manages the environment in Svalbard and is interested in gaining insight in how to manage this fragile environment. We are an international consortium. And how do we catch the interest of a decision maker in India, which is, we have the Indian Institute for Arctic Research or Polar Research as partner. And how do we engage decision makers and the public in our members' home countries? So we're struggling a little bit with that, and we have now planned a webinar to discuss this topic. And if you have any good ideas on how to help us with engaging the entire community of SciOS, which is currently consisting of 10 nations, I'm very happy to hear more about it. And then I thought I end the talk with giving you some ice, as I understand it's slightly warmer where you are right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this cool talk. It's really hot here. We have now a presenter that is here in person. It's Václav Tesa. He's from, I hope I pronounce this right, Masaryk University in Brno in the Czech Republic. And he brings some rock and roll from the music business into the world of research. At least that's what he says. And he's an author, editor, and radio speaker, and has 15 years of experience, radio, TV, and print. The title of his talk is IC 2022, Engaging the Public into the Invitation-Only Event. So enjoy. You have to share the slides.
Down here, or 5 as well. Hi, I'm new here. So I'm Václav, I'm from Brno, which is the second biggest city in Czech Republic, behind Prague. And I'm from the Masaryk University, which is the second biggest university behind Charles University in Prague. But this year, at least, Prague is jealous a bit at Brno because we are, organizing this international conference on research infrastructures. I mentioned that I'm from the music business because 2 years ago, my life was pretty easy and simple. Before the pandemic hit and the music business went downhill, promoting rock stars is a piece of cake because everybody wants to talk with rock stars, but making journalists to interview these super important persons talking about the strategic importance of research infrastructures, it's something completely different and not so much piece of cake. We all probably agree that communicating science is a challenging task, even though there are signs that the public interest in science, it's maybe on the rise a little bit. There are still a lot of challenges, whether it's the decreasing number of specialized journalists or whether it's the growing pressure on them and the hunt for clicks, not that much hunt for the content, or they might be the inner obstacles, like coming from the scientist community. It might be caused that the scientists are, let's say, some of them a different kind. Now I'm quoting actually one of them, not used to communicate with media, not really motivated sometimes to communicate with the media, motivated by their institutions, and very often not feeling comfortable to communicate with the media. So within this environment, here we are with ICRI, International Conference on Research Infrastructures, trying to let the world know about. Well, I hoped that many of you have heard about ICRI. It was preceded by ECRI, the very same conference on an European level, but in 2012, if it became international, taking place every 2 years, organized by the European Commission with the local research bodies, as is Masaryk University. We are actually a small university team organizing it, and the others provide finances and more support. So ICRI this year will take place in mid-October in Brno. We are expecting 450 persons to participate in person. And since it's going to be hybrid, all streamed online, the rest of the people will be hopefully another hundreds presented online. It's going to be people from the research infrastructures business, whether it's users, the senior scientists, whether it's policymakers, whether it's stakeholders, all those important people that decide the business and strategic matters of the research infrastructures. Now, if it was only about getting the community, research community engaged, it wouldn't be probably a big deal, because after the pandemic, people are eager to meet in person and the conference is well established. So we are pretty sure that we won't have a problem to fill the capacity limit. But right from the start, we have decided, ICRI, to make it more open, more democratic, and to try at least a bit to engage the public into the topics that matter, to let people know that there's a research going on, that there's a science happening in their city, and that they are maybe passing on and passing by the infrastructures on their everyday work to job. Now, standing here, Brno used to be called in 18th century Moravian Manchester. Now some people like to call it sentimentally the Czech Silicon Valley, because there's a lot of science and technological research going on. Well, communicating with medias, the importance of the conference doesn't really matter when you don't have the right connections with the journalist and with the right journalists. And it's hard to establish them when you get this basically a one-off conference. I remember talking with the editor-in-chief in one of the Czech radio public broadcasters after explaining him the importance of the conference, presenting him some of the speakers. He silenced for a while and asked me, will you have any Nobelists coming? So maybe. It made me realize, or well, it wasn't surprising. It just reassured me that even though it is important when it comes to communicating with public, you need to simplify a bit, and you need to explain. And also, it strengthened my firm belief in this so-called human interest story. There's this overused article in the news, at least in Czech news. The scientists have found out something, but we need to explain journalists that without the people gathering on ICRI and deciding about the money, deciding about the strategic events, there will be much less articles with the title American scientists have found out something. Of course, I am simplifying it. Anyways, the point is that if we want to promote ICRI, we need to create something more about it. And we need to not just get the media coverage, but we need to try to popularize a bit. And we cannot promote just the conference itself. So we came up with the idea of the side events, satellite events, and for the first time in ICRI history, also with a citizen program. There is this one idea or concept on the university we try to get our scientists to adapt or to embrace. And that is that the prestige of scientific work is not only declared by points and rankings, the prestige of scientific work is also determined by the extent to which society understands its contribution, which is the task of the popularization and the media coverage. And I guess that it applies both to scientific work and conferences alike. Fortunately, at Masaryk University, we got a strategic document called Science and Research Communication Strategy, which, among other things, provides kind of guidelines to our scientists. How should they communicate their achievements and why is it important? And based on this document, under the external relations and marketing department. There's a group of people trying to popularize the science in cooperation with other institutions. I believe they do some amazing projects, as you can see on the slide. One of them is the Night of the Scientist, which is actually a nationwide event when across different cities in the Czech Republic, universities, labs, observatories, they open for one night in a year their doors to the public. Me personally, I like the Science Slam, which is not our original format, so you might have heard about it. And it is this kind of popularization of contest of scientists when the scientists try to, in a let's unconventional or entertaining way, present their work. These two people are, of course, renowned scientists doing something about broccoli or genes or whatever. And this is funny when you come to the scientist and ask them to participate on the Science Slam. A lot of them is reluctant at first because they think about themselves as a serious scientist. We don't want to do this stand-up comedy or whatever. But when you explain them why is it important to do it, and we provide them also the lessons on performance. They learn, they show, they go on the stage, they kill it, they see the excitement, they see the applause of the people, and then they come back to you and ask whether the next performance is going to take place. And nowadays, the Science Slam, the team, they also go on tour across the country and perform these unconventional shows right before the students. And the second picture is from the one of the venue where it's like almost more than 500 people looking forward and visiting this Science Slam. So that was a little bit of digress. Anyways, we try to somehow fit the ICRI conference within this Masaryk University Science and Research Communication strategy. So part of the ICRI will be those site and satellites events, which are basically based on the same concept with a slight difference of where and when they will be held. We published a call to the infrastructures, and now we have like 40 of these events, ranging from smaller conferences to site visits to ground openings. And even though they are not aimed at public per se, they are still a community thing. They are going to be organized with a special ICRI logo. So already that, I guess, multiplies and extends the reach. As for the citizen program, which is another novelty for ICRI, we are working with 3 institutions in Brno. It is the Observatory, the Vida Science Center, and the Science Party, and all together we are preparing a program for the citizens. Half workshops, half citizen dialogues, highlighting the role of the research infrastructures in science, industry, and society, while some of the ICRI delegates will personally participate in this program for the public. As for the Vida, this is a photo of Vida Science Center. It is like a science-oriented amusement park where kids and families can try different experiments. And every month they do a night, scientific night on a specific topic. So in October, we have arranged a specific night which will be related to ICRI. And again, there is going to be some speakers from ICRI invited to this night and have a talk about their field of work over a glass of wine or 2. So this will be a unique opportunity also for the institution itself to enhance the program. This is the overall schedule. So you can see the conferences from Wednesday to Friday, but the whole week is filled with some events going on. Not too well. And of course, when you get the citizen program aimed at public, there comes a certain potential with it to get the media attention. And since being organized under the governance of ICRI, in the second plan, it promotes the conference as well. Not to mention the media partnership with the Czech Public TV, which will broadcast one of the most popular shows, talk shows live on Tuesday from Central European Technology Institute, CETEC, which hosts discussing ICRI topics and talking about the importance of the research infrastructures live. at 8 p.m. basically on the main program in the television. There's no time for that, but if you have listened carefully, I hope that somewhere between the lines there was this message that all of this wouldn't be possible without mutual cooperation and open partnership, because I'm hearing this all the time. The Brno is a small city. We are 350,000 people, but 9 universities, 5 of them public. Everyone knows someone. There's this strong connection between the official governance, the academic sector, and the business sector, so that there are regular meetings of these different people from all these sectors, which makes the information flow maybe easier, at least at some time. And it makes this local patriotism trying to, so to speak, make Brno great again, little by little. And this unique cooperation slowly helps building the culture or environment of communicating science. Sorry if I didn't deliver any magical recipe how to engage public into the invitation-only event. The degree is still invitation only. I'm afraid there's none other than the making a huge music festival on the science venue. But I hope I've at least somehow inspired some of you. And of course, you are more than welcome to register for ICRI, just that on the web page, or let us know. It's completely free of charge. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That was very interesting. And I'm sure that there might be some people registering after this inspiring talk. We have now one more speaker here in person. He flew from another session or had to look for shelter here in our session, as all the other speakers kind of fell out because of illness. So this was about community engagement and targeting audiences. And there will be a session on engaging scientists and users. And Frank Nugents is the missing link, kind of. He will give a talk on from pari to pari, helping the scientists with the social conversation around science. Frank is leading the communications teams of the Netherlands Institute for Radio Astronomy, Astron. He also owns a company offering advice and training in science communication. And last but not least, he's part of the WISE working group organizing this conference every 2 years. So welcome here. And I give you the screen. Good. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you to Andrea for welcoming me as an orphan in this conference to this session, as the other 2 speakers unfortunately couldn't make it. So my talk will be a bit of an odd duck during this conference. I will not be presenting any original research. I will not be presenting the results of a project. What I am aiming to present is I wanted to share a challenge that I see when we engage with scientists about doing science communication, something that I have noticed throughout my career. And I also know that I don't have the definitive answer, but I want to share some of the things that we are trying at Astron to encounter this. And also, of course, I would be very interested in hearing what your ideas and things are. So this is like a generalized conversation that I can be having with a scientist who has just done research and published about it. I'm not going to read it out loud. I'm going to let you read it for yourself. Okay. The app crashed. Oh, I have to share again. Let me see. Let's hope that was a one-time thing. To which usually my response is this, because this is of course not how I want scientists to engage with science communication and think about the importance of communicating to a public. So one of the things that first I noticed that there was a problem with this was actually during this event, which is a Girls' Day. We participate in Girls' Day every year. Girls from age 11 to 15 come to Astrom for a whole day, and they talk to scientists, they talk to the astronomers, they talk to our engineers, and they get to do things themselves to inspire them to choose for a career in STEM. And we have this one experiment that you see in the front, which we call the black hole experiment, which is basically a trampoline where the children can throw marbles across the trampoline. If there's nothing in the middle, the marble will go straight ahead. If you start putting heavier and heavier things in the middle, the marbles will start to swirl around the middle, which is how we explain how a black hole works and space time curvature by Einstein. So this is usually something that we would consider to be the big hit during Girls' Day. But we did an evaluation at the end, and the girls actually evaluated this as the lowest. They didn't find it interesting at all. So we tried to figure out why is that? And basically, this was the reason. The person giving the presentation was giving a lecture. She was not engaging the girls. She was not asking them questions. All they got to do is throw a marble, and then she would continue with her lecture. And that made me think, why is this still so prominent in scientists? This is called the science deficit model. And it is one of my pet peeves. And I hope that by the end of my career, it will be a thing of the past. But the science deficit model basically says there is a lack of knowledge in your audience, in your public. All you have to do is give them information, just send them information, and all will be fine because they will have the same information as you do. And that means that they will draw the same conclusions as you do. And of course, as communication professionals, we know that this is everything but the case. There was a nice study done. I don't think you can read the study because of the closed captioning, but it was by 3 authors in 2021. They did a study amongst astronomers at the International Astronomical Union gathering, where they try to figure out what is the vision of the scientists there and the science communicators there on the work of science communication. And one of the conclusions they drew was the continuing dominance of one-way communication model for the enhancement of scientific literacy. That is what most scientists indicate as their big goal for doing science communication. It's making sure that people have the right facts. What they also noticed, very interestingly, was that there was very limited scholarly knowledge of science communication theory. So basically, they thought, since I can talk, I can also do communication. But of course, communication is a skill, and it has a theory and models and stuff like that. But most scientists have no knowledge about this. Now, this was not the only study done. This is actually a study already from 2019 from Travis and Bauer. And they also looked at astronomers in particular, but they also looked a bit broader. And they asked them what kind of communication activities or outreach activities they did. And as you can see, most of them are aimed at what is called the general public. I do that between air quotes, because of course we all know there is no such thing as the general public. Events, they do public lectures, also one-way communication, and they most of them engage with the media. So doing interviews with newspapers, radio interviews, articles in magazines, which is of course also one-way communication. And then they conclude that if you thought this was only an astronomer's problem, no, it is not. The reason you see it very prominently amongst astronomers is because they are the ones who actually do most outreach of all the hard sciences. So they are out there all the time. So with them, we notice this. So I started wondering, is this deficit model thinking actually a problem? Because if it's not a problem, then we don't need to solve anything. So I looked in the literature, and there's a very nice essay that was released actually a few weeks ago by Dietram Schufele, who is a veteran science communication researcher from the University of Wisconsin. And he ponders on 30 years of science and society interface, and he tries to consider what are actually the most prominent challenges that we as science communicators face. Well, number one, we need to let go of deficit type thinking among scholars and practitioners focused on misinformation and other perceived informational asymmetries. And he actually goes one step further because he says it can actually do harm. And we saw this with COVID, for instance. I'm sure you all remember that every virologist in the world started to giving lectures on television programs and in newspapers about how a pandemic works and how virology works, and that is important information, but it didn't help people keep 1.5 meter distance. That is what behavioral specialists and communication specialists made sure people started doing. And he even, this study that he quotes even goes so far as to say that it cost the lives of, for instance, people in colored communities in the United States who just didn't trust science enough to follow those advices. So then I started looking at where does this come from? Where does this deficit model come from, and why does it persist so much? And this article, also not very recent, actually from 2016, had some interesting thoughts about that. It concluded that the first thing was that scientists are, of course, trained in gathering information, processing that, and making logical conclusions out of it. But what they forget is that it's not something that the regular people on the street do. Most people, even scientists, usually think with their gut first and then with their head. You know, System 1, System 2 by Daniel Kahneman. And this is something that scientists might forget because of their training. The other thing was because there's simply too little formal training on public communication. Institutes, universities just assume that because you're a scientist and you're higher educated, you are able to do communication without training. The third one was a very interesting one. They asked a large group of scientists to describe the audience that they are doing their communication efforts to. And they found that there was actually a difference in, there was a group of scientists who say, I do communication for the general public. And the general public is out there. It's not me, it's a big diffuse group out there. Those are actually the scientists who fall into the science deficit trap. And luckily, there is a growing group of scientists who actually say, no, there is not a general public, there are more general publics. There are more publics, and I am also one of those publics. And those are the scientists who you see engaging in dialogue a lot more with their publics. So we started thinking, what are the things that we can do at Astrom? And this is a work in progress. So this is just the earliest steps, but every chance I get, I try to explain to them that science communication is not a one-size-fits-all. You can vary in the different kinds of things that you do. You can have the public information or public awareness, which you see at the bottom, the one-way communication, which is fine if you want to reach a large group of people, and you hope that some of them will be triggered by what you say, and then perhaps come to you for a dialogue later on. But the next step is the public engagement and the public participation, the two-way communication, where you actually, the way I always explain it, At the bottom, you can have the reach with the transmission, but if you want to have actual impact on people, if you want to reach that state of behavioral change, which we as communication professionals would most like to achieve, you need the transaction, you need two-way dialogue. Another thing that we hope that we do to give them practical tools is to at least make them aware of the fact that you can think about a strategy, a communication strategy, where you start with the goal, your target audience, what are you going to discuss with that target audience, and only then do you start with the tools that you use for this. Whereas most of you probably know that scientists tend to start at the end. They start with the tool and then try to rationalize why they need that tool. This clicks with most people. It's a very simple model. It's not perfect, but people get this. Another resource that we are looking at using is actually, the IAU hired someone, Kelly Blumenthal, to make a workshop for engagement for scientists. So it's actually a 2-day workshop where scientists are guided through a whole process with a lot of questions and some homework on figuring out what is it exactly that I want to reach with my communication. Is it just sending that information out there, or do I want to engage in citizen science, or do I want to make sure that a specific group of people start using specific medication or stuff like that? So we're looking into seeing if there's interest among our astronomers to participate in that workshop. The article on the right is also a very interesting article where a natural scientist used design thinking to help scientists think of tools, communication tools, to use in very unconventional audiences, like a horse riding club. And just try to think of what kind of hooks can we think of that something that I'm interested in, something that horse riders are interested in, and then trying to find that link and getting into a conversation with them about science through their interest. And that's also something that we would like to try out. So basically what we want to have as a, we're actually working with our management now to draw up a science communication strategy for Astron. One of the main points, the main policy that we want to have in that vision is that science communication is a social conversation around science. Now, I didn't think of this definition. This definition comes from an article by Massimiliano Bucchi and Brian Trench that they wrote last year, where they evaluated how the definition of science communication has changed over the years, and how you now see that there is in society a large demand for having the social conversation around science, not just getting the facts and getting the information, but actually having people engage with it, talk about it, make decisions about it. So basically what we want to do is think about, if we do something in science communication, how can we make meaningful connections to our stakeholders through the science communication that we do. I have here some examples of outreach and engagement things that we are currently doing at Astron. And of course, I'm immediately mentioning that a lot of these things are one-way communication still. So we need to change that, and we need to think about new ways. So we have puzzle routes amongst the telescopes that we do, or that we operate. We participate in Girls' Day, which is, of course, should be engagement. We have like this brochure for primary school children that they can use to give speeches in class about radio astronomy. We participate in Open Day. I'll come back to that in a minute. We have a Milky Way path, which is in scale, the whole Milky Way, or the whole solar system. We have a group, this is actually also engagement. We have a group of people who live in the heart of our biggest telescope. We have the LOFAR telescope. The heart of that telescope is located in a little village called Exlo in the north of the Netherlands. These people are all volunteers. They are all people who are now in pension, so they don't work anymore, and they give tours around the telescopes. We train them, and they give tours for anyone who wants to take a look there. And of course, we engage a lot with these people on what is it that interests you, and what kind of things do you, what are your audience interested in. We have a monumental telescope from 1956 that is operated by a volunteer organization called Cameras, and they do tours in the telescope. We also operate two open science hubs, which is a concept, an open concept that you can apply in your own town. And we have one open science hub that is more of a traditional science museum, and we are actually building currently an open science hub that is more of a serious game, that is aimed towards high school students, where they get to be a scientist and go through all the questions that a scientist would have. And the last one that we actually spend the most time on is this, and this might not look very spectacular, but under that umbrella is the Secretary General of the Ministry of Science. So we spend a lot of time doing high-level stakeholder engagement. People coming over here and getting a tour for the whole day. And that is actually where we see most of our impact. That has most of the impact. So a few of the things that we are thinking about doing, setting up a new form of open day, because at open day we also notice that scientists tend to have a story in their head. People come over and they give them the story and people leave. And we actually think that we can do a bit better by first training those scientists in asking questions more to the people that come over to visit. Because science is, of course, about asking questions. So we're going to train them in how you can get a group of people and get them to answer it themselves through asking them the right questions. We have a communication building strategy for LOFAR by Elise Brouwer, and I would say hang on till the part after the break, because Elise will be discussing that community building strategy. We are using the open science hubs. I just mentioned that we have a funding proposal where we are planning on distributing a discovery box with measurement instruments that school children in the last two classes of primary school will be able to use to do experiments themselves at home. And we are particularly going to gear these discovery boxes towards the children that are in the really rural areas of our province, where we know there is low to no science capital. People will never get in touch with science through their parents. Also, we are proposing using the value proposition model, which is a marketing model that Elise is also using for our project teams. And that value proposition model forces you to think about who is my customer and what problems am I solving for my customer. And that's a different way of thinking for our engineers we know. Now, I would be very interested in hearing your suggestions. The one last thing that I wanted to mention is, of course, the name of this conference is Public Awareness of Research Infrastructures. And I was actually thinking also, when I hear all the talks that we've had over the past few 2 days, I actually noticed that public awareness is one of the lowest ambitious forms of impact that we have with each other. Most of us do things that go further and go into engagement. So I actually asked the question, does public awareness actually lead to public acceptance or even public appreciation of research infrastructures? And I don't think it does. I think we can do better than that. And that's why I think we as a community should lead by example. And my proposal would be to rename the conference from PARI to PERI, Public Engagement with Research Infrastructures. There's more credit to what the work that we do. So that's the end of my talk. And I'm sorry for the poor Photoshop. I couldn't get the E bigger. Can I stop sharing? Yeah.
Now there's time for questions and all the talks that we've heard so far, because as far as I'm informed, there should be a coffee break in 4 minutes. So let's see, maybe we go to the coffee break later. I've seen 2 questions on the Slack channel, but is there one here in the auditorium for one of the speakers? Otherwise, I would go to the Slack channel. You have.
One question to Frank. As you said, like this workshop for scientists, the 2 days workshop. I mean, if you offer them to the scientists, what is the reaction from them?
We actually haven't offered the workshop yet because I'm thinking that 2 days will be too much for them. So Elisa and I actually have to plan during the summer break to have a look at those 2 days and see if we can condense it to perhaps 1 day or half a day. But in the conversations that we've had so far with scientists, we do notice that they appreciate the fact that they perhaps lack a little bit of communication knowledge, and that they are thrilled to hear that there's more that they can do. So they actually want help. So I think it will be there will be interest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excited to hear then if approved or not.
I'll let you know.
So then I try to rephrase the questions on the Slack channel, but just let me switch to my.
Okay, the question goes to Oana Stroh. As you tackled the magical computer time expensive, have you, your community, thought about create a citizen science project to solve the need for a lot of computer time, for example, in a similar fashion to CT at Home or CERN projects, where citizens provide some CPU time on their personal computer so that the calculations for this protein folding would be distributed between many computers from the citizens rather than building a dedicated supercomputer or cluster?
Thank you for the question. No, we had not thought about this. It's certainly something to keep in mind. I will just say to maybe keep an eye out for updates that are coming up, and hopefully that will be satisfying enough. But it's a fair point. I mean, it's something that we can always consider with other databases as well.
There's another question from Lucy Moorcraft. Question goes to Frank. UK universities institutions now have a very prominent impact agenda in order to demonstrate what impact their research has in society. This is because it is part of the research excellence framework they have to submit to. This requires researchers to seek more of the dialogue and participation aspects that you mentioned to have an impact. Is impact becoming more important across other countries in Europe? And if so, is it helping researchers engage more meaningfully in the way you want them to?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I think it is also something that you see with funding agencies in the Netherlands. I don't know anything about other European countries. What I still see is that when researchers have to fill out the impact paragraph, they usually copy-paste something that they once came up with and put that in the proposal. So I think, yes, it helps that funders ask for this kind of impact, but I think it's still up to us to make sure that the researchers get the most out of that impact and actually take it seriously. But I think that is still a lot of work to be done to make sure that scientists don't see science communication as the final part of their research that can be skipped in the end, not an important part. And I think it helps that governments stress that they really want to see that impact. Yeah.
There's also another answer from Thibaut Roger. Can only speak for Switzerland. I would say yes, and maybe no also for funding agencies here. I think it depends the level of the grants. For example, juniors don't really have to answer that, but the more senior, bigger grant do have to. Thought it might not be written those in words. It goes, for example, with important need to plan for technology transfer, etc.
Very good questions. There's no more.
I actually see in the keynotes channel that Petra also has a question for Fiona and Vaclav. What did the scientists learn from community building and engaging with the public?
I think, well, for this particular audience, for Space Gang, there was a little bit of work we had to do, kind of mentoring in working with people with different types of disabilities, because some of them had kind of different learning needs and abilities and different ways we had to communicate with them. So because, sorry, I skipped through it very quickly, but some of the first work we did with the group was based on what they wanted to do, and they were interested in meeting scientists and engineers and finding more about their job, and they kind of came up with questions a bit like the journalists. They became that kind of style, and they interviewed them and had a chat about things, shared different hobbies, that kind of thing. So yeah, it was the online element that was a big learning curve for a lot of the scientists. They hadn't perhaps worked with a group in that way that wasn't a webinar or a talk. So it was kind of getting away from that and moving into more of a conversation-based activity. So it was getting over that challenge, the fear of the unknown, I guess, in a little way. And then, yeah, just the communication style. So just making sure it was not simplified communication, but I think one of the talk this morning just talked about thinking about different ways that you might display an idea, perhaps, so that everyone understands it clearly. So using pictures or objects, or which is, I think, as someone said this morning, helpful for everyone in their communication. So yeah, that was kind of the two main learning challenges. Okay.
And the other question in the keynote session was the same.
Well, I mentioned it related to the Science Slam we are doing, that scientists are often hesitant to participate in it, but I guess there's some, restraint on an institutional level that a lot of the people in science, they feel they don't have enough time for that because they have other agendas. They need to do the science, they need to teach students, and the communication or participating on this popularizing activities, it is something they often do voluntarily in their free time. They are not paid for that. So that is something that is needed to be worked on, but coming from on the institutional level. But what definitely works, the experience itself, I would say, and also this, let's say, the word of mouth advertising. It started, the Science Slam started as a really small project for a few people, and now it is really huge. Scientists really going on tour across the country every autumn when it's possible, when it's not a pandemic. And when they see the first-hand feedback from the people, and also scientists who have experienced it and recommends it to his colleague, the colleague is then more willing to participate in it. So I guess it's like in every other advertising, word of mouth. If I tell you, when I get an association with the music business, if you read about some album, reviewer will tell you that this new piece of music is really good. Will you listen to it? Probably not nowadays, because there's a ton of these reviews. But if we are friends and I tell you, go listen to this music, you will listen to it. So I guess it works for the science and these activities alike.
Thank you. Maybe one question to Christiane Hübner. Have you, maybe I missed it, but did you get any feedback on this excerpt of your annual report, how this was taken by the ones that you targeted with it? So did they like it, or did you ask them, did you get any feedback?
You mean from the targeted audience?
Yeah, from the audience. Yeah, sorry.
No structured feedback, and we are also struggling a bit in finding out how we can get this kind of feedback. So who's actually reading these? What we see is that, so we have put this leaflet several places in town. We have it at the university center, and we give it to the VIPs and so on, and it disappears. So we have to refill So someone is taking it, but if they actually read it or if it ends up in the next garbage bin, that we don't know. We have gotten feedback from the local council or the local government, so to say, that they find it interesting, and they wanted to engage more, which was then stopped by COVID. But this is a thread we have to take up again and see if we can. So they will be invited for this webinar that we are planning to see how we can make the CES report even more relevant for the society and see if we can change what is written in this summary to make it more interesting for decision makers, like going away from having a pure summary of the science report to having additional items in there that are more relevant for society than for the scientists, so to say.
Yeah, thank you. And then I wanted to ask you, Fiona, if you could share this link to this national standard for community engagement.
Yeah, sure.
Share this.
I can share a PDF or I can share the link as well.
Yeah.
I can email, let me know who I need to email, but yeah.
Or on the Slack channel, maybe there's this useful links hashtag. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
And the same with your studies, Frank, that you were citing. You were citing 2 studies. Maybe you can also share the link to the studies. They sounded quite interesting.
I can just share the slides that they have the references.
Okay, yeah, that was me. Yeah, thank you. And Václav. And Václav, there's one question concerning ICRI. Is there also a science communication session, or is it more? So, would it be interesting for us to participate?
Well, the complete program is definitely able to be found on the website, but there is one parallel session aimed at communicating the science, but not really communicating to the public, but communicating between the officials,
okay.
So
yeah, okay, no,
yes, that's the
just
answer.
For maybe this is some advertisement.
But we got a moderator, and the speaker in this session is the well-known Czech moderator and probably the most famous science popularizer in our country. So he will also at least mention communicating the science into the public, because he do amazing TV shows about the science.
Okay. So yeah, then is there one more question?
Yeah, just like at Frank in the Slack channel, maybe it's more to open a discussion, but Tibor Roger is writing to you. I guess you can do it on a literal way.
Yeah, I read it. I will engage with him.
Perfect. Thank you.
So then let's go for the